No one knows what was truly written on the lost book of Heraclitus, the book the ancient world tried to bury. But one question haunts every historian who has dared to touch his fragmented legacy. What idea could be so dangerous that even the mighty cities of Greece wanted it erased? The story begins not with a discovery, but with a warning. In the year 435 BCE, a traveler arriving in Ephesus was told never to enter the abandoned warehouse behind the temple of Artemis. Locals whispered that inside rested a set of writings so unsettling, so corrosive to power, that the city elders ordered them sealed away. But this warehouse had once belonged to a man whose mind burned hotter than any forge. A man they called Heraclitus the Obscure. He had written a single book, one that even his contemporaries admitted was not meant for ordinary men. His words were puzzles, riddles, sentences that defied the comfort of certainty. And yet, beneath their cryptic veil, something clearer, something more threatening, began to form. A message, a warning, a truth Greece was not ready to face. For decades, Heraclitus had watched his city collapse under greed, ambition, and false wisdom. The philosophers argued about the heavens while the aristocrats fought for control. Priests promised divine protection while secretly trembling before omens they refused to interpret. And in the middle of this chaos, Heraclitus wrote one sentence that would echo across the centuries. The way up and the way down are one and the same. To the common ear, it was poetry. To the powerful, it was treason. Because if this was true, if opposites were not enemies but reflections, then every claim to divine order, political hierarchy, and philosophical certainty was nothing more than illusion. A throne could fall as easily as it rose. A god could be questioned. A ruler could be replaced. And that was only the beginning. Heraclitus wrote about fire, not as an element, but as the hidden law of the cosmos. He argued that everything, from stars to cities, existed in a state of constant transformation. Nothing was fixed, nothing sacred, nothing immune to change. If this reached the public, leaders feared an idea would spread like wildfire. Stability is a lie. But what terrified them most was not his cosmic vision. It was his commentary on human nature, lines preserved only through frightened whispers and scattered fragments. One fragment, now lost, was said to accuse the ruling elite of poisoning the souls of the people. Another warned that democracies collapse not by force, but by comfort. The more Heraclitus wrote, the more enemies he created. Some called him a madman. Others said he was a prophet. But the city elders agreed on one thing: his writings were dangerous. And so, one night, long after Heraclitus had vanished into the mountains, a secret council met beneath the torchlit hall of elders. They gave a simple command: seal the book. Let no Greek read it. But they were too late. Someone else had already taken the writings, someone who traveled under the cloak of night, heading toward Athens with a sealed wooden case strapped to his back. A case marked with the ancient symbol of fire. He believed the writings were a warning Greece desperately needed. He believed the truth could save them. He had no idea the truth might instead destroy them. Because the book contained one final chapter, never mentioned in any surviving fragment. A chapter so shocking that even Heraclitus himself hesitated before carving the words into wax tablets. A chapter that claimed the gods themselves were part of the illusion, and that humanity had been worshipping shadows. But the courier never reached Athens. His body was found weeks later on the road to Miletus, the wooden case shattered, the scrolls missing. Witnesses reported seeing riders in foreign armor not of Greece, but of a distant empire rising quietly on the horizon. Persia. The question echoed across the coast. Why would Persia want the writings of a Greek philosopher? And what truth did Heraclitus uncover that frightened both sides of a coming war? No one had answers. Not yet, because only one fragment from the missing scroll resurfaced years later, burnt at the edges, cryptic as ever, but unmistakably his. It contained a single line: when men look for truth, they must prepare for fire. What fire? Whose fire? And why did Heraclitus believe truth demanded destruction? To uncover that, we must return to the night he disappeared from Ephesus. The night he left behind the book that would become known as the banned writings of Heraclitus. And the night the first attempt on his life was made. The night Heraclitus vanished, the city of Ephesus was unusually silent. A storm gathered over the horizon, but not a single drop of rain fell. Witnesses later recalled a strange stillness, an air so heavy it felt as though the world itself was waiting for something to break. Inside his dimly lit study, Heraclitus stared at the final lines of his manuscript. No one knew it then, but this was the moment that changed Greek philosophy forever. His fingers trembled as he carved his last sentence into the wax tablet. Not from fear, he had long abandoned fear, but from the weight of what he was about to unleash. He whispered the line aloud, "Thunderbolt steers all things." This was his most dangerous claim. Not because it challenged the gods, but because it replaced them. If a single cosmic force, ever-changing, ever-destructive, truly governed the universe, then temples, priesthoods, rituals, and political order were nothing more than desperate human inventions. In that moment, Heraclitus knew the elders would try to silence him. And he was right. A faint scrape echoed outside his door. Someone was there. Someone who didn't belong. Heraclitus closed the tablet, wrapped it in a cloth of dark wool, and tied it with a thin cord. He moved with the calm precision of a man who had foreseen this night many years ago. With one quiet breath, he slipped through the back entrance of his home and into the narrow stone alleyway behind it. The alley was dark, too dark. A shadow shifted near the corner, followed by the glint of a bronze dagger. The first assassin. He lunged. Heraclitus did not run. Instead, he stepped aside with almost unnatural timing, as if he anticipated the man's movement before it happened. Some later claimed this was proof he possessed forbidden knowledge. Others believed he had simply watched humanity long enough to read its patterns like a book. Either way, the dagger struck air. Heraclitus whispered, almost to himself, "All flows." His escape was not dramatic. It was precise, calculated. He moved through twisting alleys, past shuttered homes, toward the forest path leading into the mountains. The storm clouds above flickered with distant lightning, silent flashes, like warnings sent by the cosmos he worshipped. But something else stirred that night. Far from Ephesus, along the coastline of Ionia, a Persian scout ship drifted closer to Greek shores. Its captain carried a message sealed by a royal official of King Darius I. The message was simple: retrieve the writings. The man is irrelevant. Why would Persia care about the writings of an obscure Greek philosopher? What danger did they see in the ideas carved into those wax tablets? Some believed the Persians had their own mystics who read omens in fire. Others whispered that a prophecy within the royal court predicted the collapse of empires through the spread of a single idea. If so, then Heraclitus had written something that threatened not just Greece, but Persia as well. Back in Ephesus, the elders discovered Heraclitus's disappearance at dawn. His home was empty, the manuscript gone. But what terrified them was not the missing book. It was the symbol carved into his writing table. A circle of fire, intersected by a single line. The mark of judgment. It wasn't a religious symbol. It wasn't known in Greek philosophy. And yet, the moment the elders saw it, a shiver passed through them. Many believed Heraclitus had joined a secret sect hidden in the mountains, an ancient order older than Greece, older than Persia, perhaps older than recorded memory itself. The Keepers of Flux. A group rumored to protect forbidden truths about the nature of the universe. Some claimed they were descendants of early mystics who read the movements of stars long before Babylon rose. Others believed they were simply philosophers who rejected civilization entirely. But one rumor persisted above all. The Keepers guarded a knowledge so powerful it could remake the world, or burn it to ashes. If Heraclitus had joined them, then his manuscript was no longer just a collection of philosophical riddles. It had become a weapon. As the sun climbed over Ephesus, another figure entered the city, the unknown courier from Part 1. He had received a message days earlier, written in coded language only he and Heraclitus understood. It contained a single instruction: the book must reach Athens. There lies the first spark. Athens, the cradle of philosophy, democracy, and curiosity. If Heraclitus wanted his ideas to ignite change, Athens was the perfect place. But it was also the most dangerous. For if Athens embraced his ideas, the political systems across Greece could crack like pottery in a kiln. The courier retrieved the manuscript from the hiding place near the old olive grove. Wrapped in wool, sealed with a clay stamp bearing Heraclitus's personal mark, the tablet felt heavier than its physical weight, heavy with consequence. He left Ephesus before the elders even realized the writings were gone. But two forces pursued him: the Greek elders who wanted the manuscript destroyed, and the Persians who wanted it captured. Yet neither knew the courier carried only a portion of the writings. For Heraclitus had hidden a second manuscript, one containing the most forbidden section of all. A section that explained why humanity was never meant to know the truth, he discovered. The section that would later be called the fire that devours the gods. The courier rode hard toward Miletus, unaware his path would soon converge with enemies on both sides. The storm that began over Ephesus had now stretched across the coastline, lightning cracking the sky like the world itself was being torn open. As the first drops of rain fell, the courier whispered a final hope. Let Athens see the truth. He never reached it. But before his death, he hid something. Something no one would discover for nearly a century. Something Heraclitus left for only the bravest minds to find. For weeks after the courier's disappearance, rumors spread through Ionia like sparks caught in a dry wind. Merchants whispered that Persia had seized a forbidden Greek text. Sailors swore they saw soldiers dragging a wooden case onto a ship bound for Sardis. But none of these tales were true. The manuscript the courier carried had vanished completely, not seized, not burned, not discarded. Simply gone. But what no one knew, what no historian understood for centuries, was that the courier had left behind a clue, a small clay token carved with the emblem of Artemis. Most assumed it had simply fallen from his pocket. But Heraclitus's closest companion, a quiet stonecutter named Leandros, recognized it at once. It was a message. Heraclitus had once told him, when the world rejects truth, hide it where they worship illusions. And there was only one place in Ephesus where illusions were worshipped in their grandest form: the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Leandros waited until moonrise before sneaking into the outer courtyard of the massive temple. White marble columns towered like a forest of petrified giants. Torches flickered in bronze bowls, casting long shadows across the engraved floor. Statues of Artemis watched over every corridor, cold, silent, carved in stone that seemed to judge every mortal who passed. But beneath this beauty, Leandros felt the tension of a place heavy with secrets. For the temple priests had long feared Heraclitus's ideas. They said he was a corrupter of minds, a man who believed in a universe without divine order. A world where gods were not rulers, but reflections, symbols of deeper laws humans refused to understand. A world where fire, not Olympus, was the true architect of existence. Leandros stepped lightly along the colonnade, passing under frescoes depicting Artemis as mistress of the hunt, protector of the wild. But behind the goddess's serene face, he sensed something else, a warning carved into history. Heraclitus had once pointed to the fresco and whispered, "The goddess hunts illusions, not animals." At the back of the temple stood a small stone chamber used by priests during purification rituals. Inside, an ancient well descended into darkness. The well was older than the temple itself, older than Ephesus, older, some said, than humanity. It was here, Heraclitus believed, the earliest inhabitants of the region communed with forces they could not name. Leandros lifted the wooden lid. The air that rose from the well was cold, like the breath of a long-forgotten world. He lowered himself onto the rope ladder, his hands shaking as he descended into the gloom. Torchlight flickered above him, shrinking into a distant star. Halfway down, he nearly stopped breathing. Carved into the inner wall of the well, illuminated by faint torchlight, was the same symbol Heraclitus had etched on his writing table, a circle of fire, intersected by a single line. It was no mere signature. It was a marker, a signpost for one of the oldest philosophical traditions Greece had ever known. The keepers of flux had been here. At the bottom of the well lay a narrow tunnel leading beneath the temple foundations. The air smelled of damp earth and ancient stone. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic beats, like the ticking of time itself. Leandros followed the tunnel until it opened into a small chamber. And there, on a stone pedestal, wrapped in a cloth of dark wool, lay a manuscript. His heart nearly stopped. The courier hadn't died with the writings. He had delivered them to the only place Heraclitus trusted to guard truth behind a veil of divinity, the hidden chamber beneath the temple of Artemis. Leandros carefully unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a tablet, smooth, polished, and carved with precise, deliberate strokes. The title at the top was unmistakable, On the Nature of Fire. This was the missing second manuscript, the manuscript Heraclitus had hidden from the world. But Leandros didn't have time to read it. Footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind him. He turned. Torchlight glowed against the walls. Voices whispered, harsh, urgent, armed with authority. The elders had followed him. Leandros clutched the manuscript and pressed himself against the cold stone. Shadows flickered as three figures entered the chamber. Their robes bore the emblem of the city council. Their faces were grim. One stepped forward. Hand it over, the elder hissed. Those writings can plunge our world into chaos. Leandros swallowed hard. You fear truth more than lies. Truth, the elder spat. Heraclitus teaches that order is illusion, that opposites rule the world, that the gods themselves are shadows. If the people believe this, they will reject us. They will reject everything. Another elder lifted his torch. Knowledge is fire, boy. And fire destroys. Leandros took a step back. His foot touched the pedestal, and he felt a small stone shift beneath it. A soft grinding sound echoed. The floor trembled. The elders froze. The chamber began to move. The pedestal turned like a massive gear. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a second chamber, smaller, darker, and much older. As dust poured into the air, Leandros saw carvings on the walls, symbols spiraling, interlocking, forming a map of existence. Lines representing transformation, symbols for conflict and harmony, patterns of cosmic fire twisting into shapes eerily similar to the diagrams of later philosophers. Heraclitus had not invented these ideas. He had rediscovered them. One elder stepped forward shakily. What is this? Leandros whispered. A truth older than Greece. But before anyone could act, the hidden chamber groaned violently. The mechanism, awakened for the first time in centuries, began to collapse. Stones cracked. Dust filled the air. The elders panicked. Leandros grabbed the manuscript and sprinted into the second chamber just as the first roof caved in. The elders' cries echoed behind him, then fell silent under the weight of falling stone. When the dust settled, Leandros stood alone in a room carved by hands long forgotten, holding a manuscript the world was never meant to see. And on the final page of the tablet, one sentence glowed in the dim torchlight. When the gods burn, humanity will see clearly. What did Heraclitus mean? What god could burn? And what truth could shine through such destruction? Leandros didn't yet understand, but he was about to learn. Dust still hung in the air as Leandros stepped deeper into the newly revealed chamber. The torchlight quivered in his trembling hand, casting distorted shadows across the ancient carvings. The walls were covered in spirals, flames, and lines that intersected like webs, the same patterns Heraclitus had once described as the hidden architecture of reality. But the carvings were older than Heraclitus, older than Ephesus, older than the Greeks themselves. Leandros realized, with a rising chill, that the philosopher had not invented the doctrine of flux. He had inherited it. And now, by fate or accident, Leandros held the manuscript that explained everything the world was forbidden to know. He opened the tablet again. The first line took his breath away. Fire is not the destroyer. Fire is the revealer. He read further, hand shaking. That which humans call God is only the momentary shape of fire, frozen long enough to be worshipped. This was the idea Greece feared. This was why the elders wanted the writings erased. This was why Persia sought to seize them. Heraclitus wasn't denying the divine, he was redefining it. If the universe was made of constant transformation, then the gods were simply temporary forms in an eternal process, not masters of it. The Olympians weren't rulers, they were metaphors. Symbols. Masks worn by a deeper law that humans could barely understand. A law Heraclitus called logos, the reason behind all things. But the next lines shook Leandros to the core. When men cling to illusions, the fire consumes. When they abandon illusions, the fire illuminates. He finally understood why Heraclitus' writings were feared. If ordinary citizens believed this, they would question temples, laws, governments, everything built on the promise of divine order. They would realize that society's structures weren't eternal, only convenient. And those in power would fall. A sudden grinding sound shattered the silence. Leandro spun around. A panel in the far wall had slid open. Beyond it, a narrow passage sloped upward. Faint light seeped through its edges, moonlight. The ancient mechanism had not only opened the chamber, it had created an escape route. But the light wasn't the only thing entering the tunnel. Footsteps echoed through the passage. Not Greek, not elders, not priests. Persians. Leandros felt his chest tighten. He turned toward the back of the chamber, searching desperately for another exit, but the walls were solid stone. The footsteps grew louder, measured, disciplined, unmistakably military. Shadows lengthened across the walls as torchlight approached. Leandros had only one option. He pressed himself behind a large stone basin carved into the wall, an ancient ritual trough used, perhaps, by the mysterious people who built the chamber. He extinguished his torch and held his breath. Moments later, 3 Persian soldiers entered, followed by a man in dark robes. His face was stern, his beard neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp with intelligence and purpose. Leandros recognized the emblem on his cloak, the royal symbol of King Darius I. This was no scout, no simple officer. This was an imperial scholar, one of the elite advisors who interpreted omens, celestial movements, and philosophical texts for the Persian court. He approached the fallen stones of the first chamber and examined them silently. Then he spoke. Heraclitus touched a truth our empire has long guarded. A truth the Greeks cannot be allowed to weaponize. His voice echoed in the chamber like a cold wind. One soldier asked, "Do you believe the writings survived?" The scholar lowered his torch, illuminating the ancient carvings that spiraled across the wall. His eyes widened, not with fear, but with recognition. "Yes," he whispered, "and if they are here, we must claim them. Before Athens does." Leandros clutched the manuscript tighter. The scholar turned sharply, scanning the room. His gaze lingered dangerously close to the basin where Leandros hid. After a tense moment, he stepped away and approached the newly opened passage at the far end. "There are more chambers ahead," he said. "Search everything. Heraclitus' writings cannot fall into Greek hands. They would ignite their cities like oil on flame." Ignite. The word struck Leandros like a blow. This was what Heraclitus meant by, when the gods burn, humanity will see clearly. It wasn't about destroying temples or toppling statues. It was about burning illusions, the illusions that upheld empires. Greek illusions, Persian illusions, every illusion. Suddenly, something clicked in Leandros' mind. The writings weren't meant to empower Athens or Ephesus or Persia. They were meant to free humanity itself. He waited until the Persians moved deeper into the passage, their torches flickering away. Then he slipped out from behind the basin, clutching the manuscript to his chest, and hurried toward the escape route that led back toward the temple grounds. He emerged into the cool night air beside one of the outer colonnades. Moonlight bathed the marble columns in silver. Owls called from distant trees. The temple stood silent, as if holding its breath. But then, a figure stepped out from behind a column. An old man with a cloak of coarse wool and a walking staff carved with swirling patterns. Leandros froze. It couldn't be, but it was. The stranger lowered his hood. The eyes gave him away, dark, intense, burning with a fierce, almost feral intelligence. Heraclitus. Alive. Watching him. Studying him. Measuring him. You found it, Heraclitus said softly. Leandros opened his mouth, but no words came. Heraclitus stepped closer, placing a hand on the manuscript. You have seen what the elders fear. What Persia covets. What empires tremble before. He looked up at the sky, where dark storm clouds gathered, illuminated by the flicker of distant lightning. This knowledge, Heraclitus murmured, is not meant for rulers. It is meant for those who seek truth without fear of fire. Leandros finally found his voice. What will you do with it? Heraclitus smiled faintly, but his eyes held a terrifying resolve. I will do what must be done. He lifted the manuscript, pressed it to his chest, and whispered the line that had haunted Leandros since he first heard it. Thunderbolt steers all things. And with those words, Leandros understood. Heraclitus was about to unleash the final truth. The truth meant to shatter illusions and change Greece forever. Heraclitus stood beneath the towering columns of the Temple of Artemis, the stolen manuscript pressed to his chest as thunder echoed across the Ionian sky. Storm clouds gathered above Ephesus like a living creature, roaring, flickering, shifting with the restless energy he had spent his life trying to describe. Leandros stood beside him, breathless, terrified, yet unable to look away. The philosopher's eyes reflected every flash of lightning. It was as if the storm itself were answering him, recognizing him. Master, Leandros whispered, what will you do? Heraclitus placed one hand on the cold marble column. His voice was barely louder than the rumble of distant thunder. I will finish what I began. He motioned to the manuscript, the forbidden text the Greeks wanted buried and the Persians wanted harnessed. This, he said, is not a book. It is a mirror. Whoever reads it sees the world without its masks. Leandros swallowed. That's why they fear it. Heraclitus nodded. And why they must never control it. A gust of wind tore through the colonnade, scattering leaves and dust. From the shadows near the temple entrance, Leandros heard a sound. Boots striking the stone, disciplined and coordinated. Persian soldiers. Heraclitus didn't look back. They have followed the truth to its final threshold. The philosopher stepped toward the center of the courtyard, where a ceremonial brazier, used during festivals honoring Artemis, still glowed with smoldering embers. The fire was low, weak, struggling to stay alive beneath the gathering storm. He held the manuscript above it. Leandros panicked. No, you can't. After everything we've risked, after everything you've uncovered, Heraclitus turned to him with a look both fierce and unbearably calm. You think truth exists only on this tablet? No, truth is older, wilder. It lives in the world itself. These writings were never meant to survive, only to awaken. The temple doors slammed open. Persian soldiers stormed into the courtyard, followed by the royal scholar in the dark robe. His face twisted in urgency. Stop him, the scholar commanded. If those writings burn, the knowledge is lost. Heraclitus smiled almost sadly. That is the illusion. He lowered the manuscript toward the embers. The scholar shouted, No. His soldiers rushed forward. Lightning split the sky. And in that instant, Heraclitus dropped the manuscript into the brazier. Flames erupted. Not naturally, not gently, but violently, hungrily, as if the fire recognized the text and leapt to consume it. The courtyard glowed in a blinding flash of orange and gold. Persian soldiers shielded their faces. Leandros staggered backward. The wind howled. The storm roared. And Heraclitus stood unmoved. The manuscript burned in seconds. Not days, not hours, seconds. The fire rose into a twisting column, spiraling upward like a serpent of light, illuminating the carvings on the temple walls. The Persian scholar stared in speechless horror, whispering, This is no ordinary philosophy. Heraclitus closed his eyes. You chase words, he said. But words are shadows. The truth is the fire itself. The blazing column suddenly collapsed inward, shrinking, folding into itself until only a handful of glowing embers remained. Silence fell. The Persian commander lifted his sword. You have destroyed what the king commanded us to find. Heraclitus opened his eyes and smiled. No, he said. I have freed it. He pointed to the sky. The thunder clouds had begun to twist, not randomly, but in spirals, forming shapes eerily similar to the ancient diagrams carved beneath the temple. The Persian scholar stepped forward in awe. The sky, it follows his doctrine. No, Heraclitus corrected gently. It always has. You simply never noticed. Leandros felt his breath catch. The idea struck him with the force of revelation. Heraclitus' writings did not create dangerous truth. They revealed what had always been there. The logos. The eternal flux. The fire behind all things. Persian soldiers approached to seize Heraclitus, but the philosopher raised a hand, not in defiance, but in acceptance. You cannot imprison fire, he said. You can only fear it, follow it, or be consumed by it. The scholar hesitated. He lowered his torch. Let him go, he murmured. What? The commander barked. He has already released the knowledge. The tablet was never the threat. The soldiers fell still. Heraclitus stepped back from the brazier and turned to Leandros. Take nothing from this place, he said. Not a word. Not a symbol. Not a fragment. Leandros blinked. But then the world, Heraclitus interrupted, must discover its truths on its own. Only then will it be ready. He placed a hand on Leandros' shoulder. Remember what you saw. Not to preserve it, but to understand it. Then, without another word, Heraclitus walked into the storm, his silhouette illuminated by flashes of lightning until he disappeared completely into the darkness beyond the temple. Leandros called out once, but the wind tore the sound away. The Persian scholar watched silently. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, in the hidden chamber that began this journey, the ancient carvings shifted as dust settled, revealing one final phrase, carved long before Heraclitus was born. Truth burns illusions. Leandros stared at the sky. He finally understood. When Heraclitus said the gods would burn, he never meant destruction. He meant revelation. He meant that when the illusions fall away, when the masks of power are gone, when humanity finally sees the world as it truly is, a new kind of clarity begins. A clarity Greece was not ready for. A clarity the world still fears. A clarity Heraclitus carried into the storm, leaving no writings behind, only a legend. A legend of the philosopher who rode in fire, and the truth powerful enough to threaten empires.